Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 332. Today we're going to talk about Tuscany, and this is an expansion for Viticulture, which was released last year. So what this expansion does is it actually adds, 4 Tier 1 modules, 4 Tier 2 modules, and 3 Tier 3 modules. There's also a solitaire expansion. Now, the way that the game is presented is to almost have kind of a legacy format. They actually give credit to Rob Daviau and Risk Legacy. And the idea is that you kind of play and unlock these as you go to add more and more complexity and interactions and all kinds of different widgets and things to the game as you play it. But the name of the expansion actually is pretty fitting because it does evoke a time and a place, whereas Viticulture was sort of an abstract location, just generic winemaking. There's a lot of locale, regionality, and basically theme added to the game now. So as you can see, this bird's eye view gives you some semblance of all of the different pieces and things that have been added to the game. You've got some brand new wine tokens, some new money. The wine tokens themselves actually fit better on the board. This is a nice little upgrade. And the money is this awesome metal tokens, and these quickly replace the cardboard that came with the original. You've got a whole mess of cards and tokens and widgets and things. You can actually see here the board is quite a bit bigger. Now this board itself is actually one of the modules. So you can choose to play with this board or the original. There's actually some modifications to the player board as well. One example are these vine fields here, which you can actually sell off. And the token count for all of the pieces that are given to a player is increased dramatically. You can see there's a bunch of different workers, a couple new buildings, some influence stars, and etc. So as I said before, the game presents a few ways to sort of unlock all the different pieces of the expansion. Now I'll talk a little bit more about my thoughts in regards to that generally at the end of the video, but let's kind of quickly go through all the different modules and I'll give you kind of my thoughts as I go through them. So the first module that you have is the Mamas and Papas, and players will shuffle these up and deal these out randomly to players, or you can even have them choose, but each player is going to start with a mama. In this case it's Ariel, and she's going to give you 2 workers, $2, and you'll start with a summer visitor and a wine order card. And Papa Stefan here is going to give you a little bit of a choice. You're going to get $4 plus your grande worker, and then you have a choice of getting an extra $2 or starting with your irrigation built. So you're always going to have 3 workers to start the game, 2 regular, 1 grande, and then a little bit different card deal, as well as a little bit different starting money and or buildings. Now I'll give you my thoughts on the Mamas and Papas in a second, but first I'm going to talk about the next module, which is the patronage. You can see here there's a variety of patronage cards, and this is the back side. On the back side you can see here is how you can actually activate the patronage card. So when you go to fill a wine order, you can instead fill the patronage cards that you were dealt, and you can see here you need any level 5 wine, that's what the gray glass means, any type of wine that's 5 or higher, and you'll score 3 points for that when you do it. And the rules say to go ahead and tuck the card underneath your player board, but what these have on the other side of them is a sort of a hidden goal. So in this case you can see fewest structures. So if at the end of the game this goal is still true for you and you have the fewest structures built, you can see you get an extra 2 points at the end of the game. So I kind of like these two pair together, because let's say you get a Papa and he gives you the tasting room, and you get that and you start giving a lot of tours, you get a lot of points that way. So you kind of go down the strategy of not so much filling orders, but just kind of selling off wine tokens and things. So I'll talk about that in a minute. So your strategy will kind of, naturally go towards one way or the other. But if you have a patronage card, which kind of, gives you some other options, it gives you a little bit more robustness to the way you're going to approach the game. So I really think these two should be paired together, but I would not ever play without either of them either. So that's the Mamas and Papas and the patronage cards. The next module we'll talk about are the advanced visitors, and I'll go ahead and mention a tier 2 module, which is the new visitors. There's a few ways you can do this. You can play with just the advanced, you could play with the new. The rules tell you to take out certain cards from the base game, but you can also just leave them all shuffled together. I like to leave them all shuffled in. One example here, we'll take a look at an advanced visitor for a summer card, and you can see this one gives you a lot of choices. So you can play this card, you get some coins, you get some points. Some of these might offer you to either plant vines or build a building, etc. But you can see you get a lot more cards in each of the different visitor decks. And I think this goes a long way to alleviating some of the complaints that I've heard, at least against the first edition of the game, where you draw cards and they're not really in tune with what your strategy is doing. And if you get cards late, they've got to really kind of sync up, or else, you're just going to get lucky. But I've never really had too much of a problem. I'm kind of this type that, I'll draw a bunch of order cards and get some visitors and things before I start worrying too much about my strategy. It may make me a little bit late to victory if somebody gets really lucky and gets everything, lined up for them, but that kind of, I'm okay with that. So I think this is going to be something that people want to explore. I think you can custom tailor your different visitor decks and really make it however you want. And there are some cards that are nasty that'll say, hey, you either lose a point or you give me some money or, etc. So people may not like those, so you can kind of take those out. But I do like this because this game is different than most worker placement games, and it's why it still sits in my collection. Is the only game that really kind of does this with this kind of interesting card play and sort of pushing your luck and things is Lords of Waterdeep. But that has a very different theme. It's a very different game, and especially with this expansion. So I like it. Kind of fits into that niche of dynamic sort of combos, doing a whole lot on a turn. Maybe filling multiple orders and things, and really sort of surprising people. So I like that. That keeps the game exciting. It is definitely a race to points, and so I think the cards act in that way, and they really help enhance that. The last tier 1 module are these property tiles that you'll place in each of the fields on your player board. You start the game with 3 of these face up, but you can take actions to sell these, generate a little bit of extra cash for yourself, and you can kind of tailor your strategy based on how you want to do these property tiles. You can see here's a new spot on at least the new board that allows you to flip a property tile, but there's also a little token that you can place on the board that comes with the base game if you just want to add this property module without playing with the new board. And this is cool. I like this thematically. I don't know that it changed up the game drastically, but it is cool because if you're one of those that wants to go for like the big, one-shot recipe, so to speak, out of the one field, then you can do that, and then you can also sell off the properties to make a little bit more money. So if you draw some good orders that kind of fit that strategy, you can go for that. But there's also some different end game bonuses with the patronage that maybe you want to have a lot of fields or you don't want that many fields, so you can kind of play with that strategically as well. And it's kind of cool because you can sell off properties. Now let's talk about the main tier 2 module, and that's going to be this giant board. Now, there's a few things to note about the board. First, we have a different turn order phase that's going to work very differently, and we also have 4 different phases of worker placement. We actually have a spring worker placement phase, followed by a summer, followed by now a fall worker placement phase. Remember, in the base game all you did was draw visitor cards, and then finally a winter worker placement phase. You can also see that the game now ends when somebody hits 25 points as opposed to 20. There's a lot more ways to score points now. There's also a little area control board in the lower left hand side, and I'll talk about that in a second. So the way that the turn order works is very different. Players will put their roosters in order like they do in the base game, but you don't get any bonuses right away. Then, as the yellow player passes in this example, they're going to move into summer, and then they're going to take a vine card. And then they pass again in the fall, they'll take a summer visitor card, and then you can see they don't get anything when it moves into winter. The other thing to note is that when you pass in winter, you're actually going to remove your workers from the board, actually freeing up spots for other players to fill orders and do things in winter. And you're going to immediately pick a turn order slot for the following year. Now this works a little bit differently. If you chose the 7th slot in the previous year, you're actually going to take the grape token, and this basically means whoever placed the 7th slot in the previous year has to go first in the next year, where they get no bonuses. Now let's go over some of the new spots on the board. This one says you can place or move one of your influence tokens, and this you will do on the area control board on the lower left hand corner of the board. Whenever you place a token, you're actually going to gain the bonus. So in this case, you would gain $1 once you place the token. If you move a token, you don't get the bonus, but what you're trying to do is at the end of the game have the most tokens in a particular region, and then you're going to score the points depicted at the end of the game. The next spot we can see here is to trade 1 for 1, and this replaces the sell spot. So if you get a card that actually says sell some grapes, you still will sell the grapes for the amount indicated on your crush pads. But if you choose to do this here, you can trade in one of these for one of the others. So for example, you could get rid of a point and then get a level 1 grape. So this is really going to add to the flexibility. This area, which is available during all seasons, you can gain $1 or a structure card. And I'll talk about structure cards a little bit more in a second. But moving into fall, we can see some other differences with the spaces, which I haven't talked about about yet. Here you can harvest a field, but you can see there's 2 bonus actions. So if you go on the leftmost spot, you can actually harvest an additional field, whereas if you go on the second spot, you can harvest a field and then get an extra $1. Moving into winter, we can see the same idea here where you can play an extra winter card or get an extra $1. Next, we have a new way to get points with wine. You actually can go here and sell a wine token, and you can see you have a flat sort of rate for the different types of wine. So you can sell a normal white or red for a point, a blush for 2, and a sparkling for 4. So the board is really the main expansion, in my opinion, in this tier, and probably in the whole game. I really changed up the turn order. It changes up all of the options. You've got a lot more flexibility, especially as you play with more players. Now the slots work the same way. So in a 2-player game, you just have that left slot available. In a 3 and 4 player, you have the left 2 slots available, and so on. And so I really like this. I would say I never would play without the board. Now the board is double-sided. You can have the board with the structure cards on one side, or the side without the structure cards. I'll talk about the structure cards more in a minute. But this is really, I would say, kind of reviewing a little bit here, but if you're really just going to play with only one thing, I would say add the new visitor cards, do the mamas and papas, and the patronage cards, and the new board. Now you could probably take or leave the property tiles. I like those. I will play with those. But I would say that's the main thing. Get the new cards, customize the deck how you want, play with the new board, and play with the mamas and papas and the patron. It adds a little bit more interesting, flexibility with the end game scoring. And the next expansion is the special workers that come with the game. And as you can see here, there are different workers in the player color that have these cool little different outfits painted onto them. And what you're going to do is shuffle up these special worker cards and then deal out 2 of them. And in this case, we have the farmer and mafioso that we've dealt. We're going to put those 2 special workers next to the train worker space. And now each player, for an extra $1, can, when they train a worker, get access to either the farmer or the mafioso in this case, and these have different special abilities. What the farmer allows you to do, for example, is when you place him on a space, you can get any of the bonuses that would be available on that particular worker placement spot, even if it's covered up. And the mafioso works as follows. When you place the mafioso on a non-bonus action space, you can actually take that action twice. Now there'd be a deck of structure cards on the board, and each player is going to take and add a little structure board to the left side of their player board. And here you can see we've got 2 places for structures. And so when you go to a spot to build a structure, you can instead build one of these structure cards, and you'll pay the cost in the upper left hand corner, and then you'll place it onto your structure board. You've got space for 2 of these. Once you've filled up your board, you can put a worker down on your board to destroy one of the structures and then replace it with another one later in the game. And you can see here you get 1 point for building the structure itself, plus it's going to have a special ability. So for example, this tavern says, when you play visitor card, you may discard 2 grape tokens to gain 3 points. And this banquet hall lets you break the rules a little bit. It says you gain the benefit of placing an influence token even when you just move it. Okay, so that's all of the tier 1 and tier 2 modules. Now these last 2, the special workers and the structures, they add quite a bit to the game and really can change things up in terms of what's available to people and what all the cool different combos that are available. Because not only do you have the cards now, you've got the structures that you can build and you can abuse those. Those sometimes will have your own little worker placement spot that you can put workers on for yourself. They may give you like residual points and residual income throughout the game. And then some of those special abilities on the workers can be pretty cool. So what I've done now is I've played through all the tier 1 and tier 2 stuff. I haven't played with any of the tier 3 stuff. Now, I'm at the point where my particular opinion of this, I've played this 3 times now with a different variety of setups. But I would say I'll probably settle on playing with everything in tier 1 and tier 2. I think so. Now, the tier 3 stuff is interesting because it is a very kind of weird thematic sort of add-on. So you can, based on the rules, play with all the tier 1 and tier 2 stuff, and it tells you to choose one of the tier 3. Now what are those? Well, you have this sort of sub-game with this Mafia expansion where you're sort of dealing in these, not really illicit goods, but you have these cards that you'll trade around, and you can use your Grande worker to trade those with other players, and then whoever has the highest value Mafia card gets some points. There's also sort of a formaggio expansion where you have cattle and cheese and you do different things with that. So your vineyard is expanded and now you have all this extra business that you want to go into. And another one is a arboriculture expansion, which is similar. You get like apple trees and pear trees and all that kind of stuff. So it's very much a sort of a tacked on, not tacked on is negative, but it's sort of this extra thing sort of bolted onto the game above and beyond just, you know, the regular winemaking aspect of the game. So I'm of the thought that I feel like I'm trying to figure out if I'd rather play with the structures or the special workers. Because everything up until those two, I think I would consider like mandatory. You know, like it's a necessary upgrade and expansion. It makes the game better and it makes the game awesome, more awesome than before. Every time I play something new with the game, I'm like, oh, this is way better than it was before, even though I really liked it before. So that's my opinion on this, is that you got to play with a new board, you got to play with the new cards, and play with the mamas and papas and patrons. That adds some good dynamics to the game. The properties, I like the properties. It gives you some interesting stuff. It feels thematic, but I don't think that's a necessary thing to add. I don't have a problem with it. I'll probably always play with it, but I don't think it's necessary. The special workers, I really like that. That's a cool aspect. I'm really glad they did that, because that's one thing you don't see very much of in a worker placement game. There was another game I'm forgetting. I'll probably throw it up here in an annotation, but there was another one where you had special workers. Now Manhattan Project did it, but there was another one where you had workers that were represented by a card and they had a different special ability. But yeah, this is cool. I like this idea of not just generic workers that are all the same, but you've got a chef, you've got an innkeeper, you've got a mafioso, and they have different special abilities that make them unique, as a unique personality in the game. So I really like that, and I also like the structures because it gives you sort of a constant special ability. But it's like all of this stuff just adds a ton, and I think it's fun, but I think some people might find that unwieldy because it takes a game, you know, for my money, kind of replaced like a Stone Age and, you know, that sort of level of strategy game where it's in a good family, easy to play, lots of dynamic card play, you know, enough luck in the game to keep it interesting so multiple people can win and all that good stuff. And then, you know, adds on a lot of strategy, a lot of combos, a lot to sort of take in. So, you know, take that with what you will there. Now the extra stuff, it feels like that really is going to push it over the edge in terms of, you know, whatever the, you know, people are going to be able to consume and to process. But overall, I think it is a good expansion. I think you should get the expansion. It's going to make the game great. The main thing is the board and the cards and everything. That's really going to add a lot of flexibility, a lot of dynamics to the game. The game that is, you know, is dynamic anyway. A lot of these worker placement games, they can feel sort of like stale and on rails, and it's very optimizing and things. But this has enough with the card play and sort of the different avenues for victory in terms of like giving tours or selling wine tokens directly now versus just doing the fill orders and all these other little different ways to score points with the cards and the structures and everything. This adds a lot of dynamics. And the thing that I really like about this, I want to sort of give a takeaway with this, is, you know, they give kind of the legacy description of like, hey, it's a legacy game and you can play that. Now, I'm in like two boats with that. On the one hand, I see that and I agree with that. And I think what's interesting about it is sort of a Euro that lives in a universe, right? And it's not like a fantasy or sci-fi thing. A lot of these things, you know, that you get this and it's like, oh, I feel the theme of it. You know, I'm in this space, I'm in this area, and I feel like I'm, you know, immersed in the theme. This is, you know, a realistic theme. It's winemaking, but it feels like it's a universe. It feels like a little village, or in this case, Tuscany, where people are. You've got different workers. You know, different things are happening. It feels like there's an alive, you know, concept here, not just, you know, victory point optimization, which I like. But I think I like that aspect of it, and it's like I want to say the legacy part adds to that, but it's not, because legacy, and it's going to be an interesting debate, I think, maybe in some circles, where what is legacy? Because legacy is like, okay, you have changed the board irreparably with a sticker or a marker, and now it's forever, and it's your copy, it's your group's copy forever. Whereas this, you don't really ever change the board permanently. But I don't know that that's what legacy has to mean. It doesn't have to mean permanent. I think you could, there's some different ways to do the unlocks in here. Some of them are more thematic and RPG elements, and you could sort of write down which expansions you want to use based on, you know, people choosing, or the winner choosing, the loser choosing, or there's some different scenarios you can play through. But it almost meets the legacy test. I think what most people's legacy test is going to be, but then it kind of backs off, because I'm at the point where I just want to find, you know, the optimal way to play. But again, I'm not saying I don't want to add the Boriculture or the Mafia expansion, but that'll be like, that's going to be down the road. You know, that's going to be a few months down the road where we've played it enough. I'm like, hey, let's throw arboriculture in there and see how that changes things up. But I like it because it feels like a place I'm going to and revisiting just by the fact that I can change it. I don't have to change it permanently, and there's so many modules and things, and it doesn't feel like the modules are, here's new ways to score points. It feels like I'm adding sort of the living, breathing thing. I'm adding structures. I'm adding, individual workers. I will be adding arboriculture. We will be branching our businesses into these other markets and things. It's not just like, here's another way to tweak our formula to score points. So in that case, I think it succeeds at the legacy part where it feels like I'm coming back to a time and a place that exists, in this space. So I'm in two minds of that because you don't change it permanently. So I feel like the legacy label misses, but then on the other part of me, it's like, well, why does legacy have to mean permanent? Why can't it just mean tracking? Because, if you play a game of Descent and you have multiple campaigns, that's like a legacy game, right? Because now you're on, campaign 20 or scenario 20, and, your overlord has kept track of what everybody's doing and all your hit points and experience points and all that stuff. So that's a legacy game too. Just because I'm not putting a sticker on the board doesn't make it not legacy. Now, I think, on the other hand, that's kind of what makes legacy different. It is permanent, and so that is, you have an artifact after 15 plays of your experience. So I think there's some big gray area there. But anyway, I would definitely say if you're a fan of viticulture, grab this. It's a no-brainer. So thanks.